are again with World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley speaking from Washington, D.C. Now, what is the lesson of all of this brouhaha, all of this hysterical attention? One thing, of course, is that as you descend into a world economic depression, which is the reality of today's world, the hysteria of masses of people becomes an important factor. This is vaguely the work of the German writer Elias Canetti, right? The behavior of crowds. But the psychology of masses, crowds, mobs, under conditions of a breakdown crisis of civilization is unfortunately what we now see. And to the extent that political leadership fails, as it does, for example, in the case of Obama, betrays, but certainly fails, and in addition betrays and attacks its own supporters, this makes people more suggestible for all kinds of activity. And this goes for all sides of these various hooked up, fake, manipulated conflicts. Let us review what we in Western civilization certainly have learned. We had the period of the wars of religion, what is known as the Protestant Reformation, and I use these words not because I agree with them, but because this is a way to make it understood what I'm talking about. The Protestant Reformation, starting more or less with Luther in 1517, you could say it actually starts in Florence with Savonarola in the 1490s, in 1493 and 1494, similar kind of thing, although not qualifying as Protestantism quite yet. And it goes then all the way through the Schmalkaldic League, the wars of Charles V, the French Wars of Religion, and then the big one, the 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648. So you've got a period of about 140, 150 years, which is that of wars of religion. And the net result, of course, is that about one-third of the people in Europe are massacred, and in particular in Germany, in Central Europe, Czech, Bohemian areas, places like this, it gets up probably to about half of the population exterminated, so much so that we can go back to a poet like the French Pléiade poet, Ronsard, R-O-N-S-A-R-D, who says, one of his poems, "Happy are the people who never heard of Luther, of Melanchthon, of Bucer, and Zwingli, and all these other people. Happy are the people who were just left alone." Something to that, more than a little. But the political lesson you learn from this is that religions, by definition, advance absolute claims. Every religion is going to claim necessarily to be the absolute imperative, the cosmic explanation of all truth, and therefore what you must do and the way that world society has to be ordered. And the problem, of course, is given the plurality of religions, which is there, and it's a reality of the world, which will not change, you're going to have the absolute claims of these competing religions entering into conflict and collision. These absolute imperatives, therefore, deriving from the religions, must be rejected because public order, peace and quiet, and the progress of civilization must take precedence over the various apocalyptic claims of all of these religions. If you take the absolute claims of the competing religions seriously, they will destroy public order. They must therefore be rejected. And one of the ways that this is actually carried out, then, is through the growth of the modern state. In other words, it's going to take a modern state, and it's going to have to be a fairly robust modern state, to say no to the various priests, imams, and whatever else, reverends, that may be present in a society, saying, you're going to have to hold all of that in abeyance because public order and the rule of law takes precedence over your absolute cosmic metaphysical claims, imperatives, pretensions, and so forth. This is a great lesson. All of that suffering, 1517 to 1648. And then people will say, but no, but they're desecrating the symbol of my absolute claim. Sorry, no matter who you are, the public order and rule of law take precedence over all of that. The result of the Protestant Reformation, you don't want to wish the Protestant Reformation on anybody, certainly not the Islamic world. It's easy to say the Islamic world has not gone through the Protestant Reformation. Well, unfortunately, the Protestant Reformation causes a little dark age, that period again, 1517 to 1648, when these matters are pretty much thought out, leads to a significant partial collapse of European civilization. And again, the extermination of about one-third of all of Europe and about half of the key central parts, Germany and the related areas. And in particular, the place where this comes out maybe the clearest is in France. The French wars of religion, much neglected today, but full of interesting lessons for our time. We're talking 1562 to 1598. It's a period of multiple, ultimately a dozen or more, individual wars of religion. It's not like the American Civil War where there's more or less of a front and you have one army on one side and one army on the other. It's a chaotic pattern of rebellion that's all over the place. It's everywhere and nowhere. It flares up, dies down, flares up, dies down. The fronts are changing. And out of this comes the outlook, which I have more or less just summarized, and it comes out in the person of King Henry IV, the first of the Bourbon kings, because the decline of France, 1562 to 1598, largely under the dying Valois dynasty, which had, of course, produced one of the greatest kings of all time, Louis XI, in the late 1400s, the creator of a modern state. But here is now the challenge to the modern state. And this is the point. This is all manipulated. It is done by Calvin from Geneva, and he says, I'm going to have the evangelical ministry to France from Geneva. Well, that turns out to be the destabilization of France, and he knew it, of course. And who is it that picks up on Calvinism? Is it the downtrodden peasants? No. It is the French nobility. And, of course, anybody who studies French history in these centuries, one of the constant maxims that you can always figure will hold good, the French nobility is revolting. Yeah, the French nobility is revolting because they're always revolting. They are a feudal aristocracy. They attempted to revolt against King Louis XI of France, and they were crushed. That was called the League of the Public Good, La Ligue du Bien Public, under Louis XI, and he was able to defeat them. The League of the Public Good, led by the Duke of Burgundy, Charles the Foolhardy, Charles the Bold, who paid with his life. He was found dead in the mud on one of these battlefields. So hats off to the statecraft of King Louis XI of France, probably the most masterly founder of the modern state. He studied the Italians. He studied Gian Galeazzo Visconti and Sforza and Milan and these places. And then he did it on the scale of a great modern state. However, that French nobility, always revolting, did not give up, and they never gave up. In some ways, some of them are still there. And they battened on to Calvinism as a cloak for rebellion. And with that, they were able to recruit all sorts of people to join them and tie up the society for decades and decades and decades. Don't let it happen.